This video brought to you by jadedpainting.com. If you need your miniatures painted to a tabletop standard, check out jadedpainting.com. Hey everyone, welcome back to part 3 of this Dark Potential painting tutorial. My name is Jay and I'll be showing you how to paint this Petrov-Morales Corporation Director. I started by giving all of the metallic areas that we just painted a Nuln Oil shading. If you want your metallics to look a little bit more dirty and older looking, I recommend giving them a 1-to-1 mix of Nuln Oil and Agrax Earth shade. Since this person represents the corporation and probably has a little bit of money, I decided to give it a cleaner appearance and just give a Nuln Oil shading. However, this Nuln Oil shading will actually still make it look relatively dirty and older, just not as old if you added Agrax Earth shade. As with before, if you're unhappy with the depth of shading after one shade, feel free to apply a second one. Just remember to let the first one completely dry before proceeding to the second. And make sure to keep the shading only in the center of the discs and don't let it get outwards, because it would actually ruin the nice blue gradients that we worked so hard to get. When the shade was dry, I gave all these silver areas a dry brushing and a highlight of Iron Breaker, the first layer color associated with Lead Belcher. As you can see, I'm focusing on all the raised areas of the belt buckles and the belt parts, as well as the center of the discs and the goggles. And for the gun, I just gave it a simple dry brushing over all the metallic areas. And here you can see me doing the dry brush over these metallic areas. Remember just to keep in the lines and do a clean dry brush so you don't get the metallics on the dark gray areas. With the metallics done, I decided to paint all of the ropes, whether it be on the wristbands of the gloves or on the gun, with white scars. I purposely did not use the thicker white paints, such as ceramite white, because I wanted to keep the nice details that are on the model, and so I'd recommend going with a thinner paint, in this case, white scars. The big problem with sticking to a solid white color is that white is very hard to see any depth, so you lose all the nice recesses on all these rope areas. So the next step that we have to do is to give it a shading, so that way we can actually see the gaps between the ropes. So then I gave all of these areas a very watered down Nuln Oil shading. I used about a 1-to-1 mix of Nuln Oil and water. So that way the Nuln Oil will still get in the recesses and tint them so that you can easily see them and differentiate the individual ropes and wires, but it will not be strong enough to actually darken all of the raised areas. It'll keep them relatively white, or maybe a very, very light gray, as opposed to tint them completely. With the ropes done, I started on all the red areas on the model, specifically the shoulder pads and the lines on the back of his jacket, with Mephiston Red. Mephiston Red is a great dark base color from Games Workshop, and it gives excellent coverage over pretty much any primer color. So it is great for cleaning up the colors on the model, and it goes great over the gray primer. As before, if you're unhappy with the first coating, feel free to do a second one. To keep with the uniform, I also decided to paint the left elbow pad red, so it looks kind of like a corporation uniform with reds, whites, and grays and blacks. So it's a relatively simple but effective color scheme that represents something that would be called a corporation. And as you can see here, I'm using a very thin brush to paint the lines on the back of his jacket. They're very thin lines, so use the finest brush you can and do very slow, long, thin brush strokes with a minimal amount of paint on the brush to do these lines. Next, I decided to give all these red areas a Carroburg Crimson shade, just to get in the recesses and give some nice depth in the recesses and provide some contrasting colors, so that it's not just a flat red color on all these areas. This is especially important on the elbow pads, since it actually has a lot of recesses. And finally, to highlight all these areas, I highlighted them all with Evil Sunz Scarlet, the first layer color associated with Mephiston Red from the Citadel range. And as you can see here, I basically just used an overbrush technique on the shoulder pads, and that way it just gives them a little bit more depth, and then I re-highlighted the lines with Evil Sunz Scarlet to make them really pop. And that's it! You now know how I painted up this director from Petrov-Morales Corporation. As you can see, I just went with a simple gravel base with a little bit of grass, and it easily blends in with a nice uniform from the corporation. I really hope you enjoyed this painting tutorial. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section down below, and stay tuned for more Dark Potential painting tutorials. Till next time, this is Jay saying, happy painting everyone.